Hey gamers, it's Brutal Compounder. You know, I almost didn't make this video about 2016 and gaming. And no, not because nobody would watch it. Doom was created by a team of top-notch professionals who were committed to one mission, and that mission was let you have as much senseless, shameless fun as possible. They succeeded completely. Every part of the game works to push through that single unitary Doom experience. Extreme speed, extreme violence, extreme twitchy gameplay, extreme music, extremely fucking good! This game blindsided me, blindsided everybody. Let's look at the first trailer that they showed for this game. It's a snooze fest. And look at the real game. Oh my god. You gotta play Doom. You gotta play Doom. If you have any interest in first-person shooters at all, you have to play Doom. This game wears its heart on its sleeve from beginning to end, and that heart is bleeding hellfire red raw. Play Doom. The Last Guardian.
Elio! Itek! Itek!
Darkest Dungeon. After Bloodborne got me all revved up on Eldritch Horror, I thought that Darkest Dungeon was exactly what I was looking for. It hits that tone perfectly. The narrator is this deep, foreboding, Lovecraftian man who tells you about the horrors of the deep. But the game kinda sucks. I get that disempowering you is part of the point. You're not supposed to be able to just plow through the game if you're skilled enough. It wants to instill that feeling of forces larger than you, beyond your control, are fucking with your party, and you may not make it through a lot. I get all of that, but the point is, it's not fun. It's not fun when your party just starts attacking each other for no reason, or when you just walk into a massive group of enemies that you couldn't have foreseen coming, and just have to lose because you're against insurmountable odds, and it just sets you back having to rebuild a party, and I don't want to do that. I don't have the fucking patience for it. I'm sorry. Good try. I didn't like it. Civilization 6. Oh shit, I forgot I bought this game. I paid full price, $60 for this, but then I realized that none of my friends had it or were going to buy it anytime soon. And multiplayer is the most fun I have playing Civ, and I just really didn't have the time to play single player. And, I just want somebody to play with me. Abzu. There's not much to the gameplay, but that works to the game's benefit. The basic premise is that there's some big glowing thing at the bottom of the ocean and you're trying to swim to it. Along the way, you make friends with a great white shark. You meet little robot drones who help you out. You give birth to lots of sea creatures by exploding the amount of little fossils in the ground. You can grab onto fish or turtles and just let them take you where they want to go. If any of this sounds appealing to you, then you'll really like Abzu. The game is beautiful to look at, and it sounds just as good as it looks. You can clearly see the Journey crossover with the musician and the lead art designer. And just like in Journey, there were a handful of moments that really dropped my jaw just with the spectacle of it and how serene and perfect it all felt. But for some reason, despite the artistic and technical aptitude of Abzu, the game never carried the same gravity that I felt Journey and even Flower did. Those games were slow burns that built up to something that felt really, genuinely special and big. And Abzu kind of does that, but I don't know. It's hard to figure out why this didn't feel like it hit those same highs. But it didn't. It came close though, and it's worth a try if you like Journey. Batman, the Telltale series. I don't know if the problem is me, or the problem is Telltale. They have been completely unable to retain my interest past episode 1 of their games lately. In 2014, I said, whoa, Borderlands, the whatever, pre-sequel bullshit Telltale thing. It's great, and it was. That first episode was good. And the second episode was straight back to Walking Dead Season 2 bland Telltale nonsense. Episode 1 of Batman was good. As for the rest, I'm tired. I just want to go to bed. Just give me a blanket and a warm milk and let me go to bed. Overwatch. The most TF2 game since TF2, and I love it. I love it, but it has shortcomings. To illustrate where I think these shortcomings lie, I'm going to make comparisons to Team Fortress 2. As a class-based, team-based shooter, it's a natural comparison to make. Let's look at mechanics first. There is a noticeably lower execution skill ceiling in Overwatch as opposed to Team Fortress 2. Barring a few exceptions like Widowmaker and McCree, the real skill required of you in Overwatch is not your Twitch aiming or Twitch movement abilities. It's about making decisions and positioning yourself along with your team in the correct way to win certain team fights and exchanges. Now, I'm no pro at Team Fortress 2 or Overwatch, but in my years of playing the former and my months of playing the latter, it's noticeable how much less skill on a basic aiming execution level is required of you by Overwatch. Now that just changes what you have to prioritize. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I kind of draw the comparison between Smash Melee and Smash 4, where there's less technical skill required of you in Smash 4, so it strips that out and it becomes more about just the decision-making process. But to me, getting better at executing is part of the fun of a multiplayer game. It's why CSGO held my interest for so many years, because the more you played it, you'd get slightly better at aiming, and that would give you slightly more of an edge over your opponent. I think that's interesting, and it's more interesting to me than just refining the decisions you make or learning about a new strat that you can then implement just by choosing to. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I just don't play the game enough, but to me it seems like Overwatch has a lower execution ceiling. Second, style. Overwatch has no coherent style, where Team Fortress 2 was unified and brilliant in its style. Now, style is totally distinct from the characters in the games and their personalities. The characters in Overwatch are very colorful. It's a very wide, diverse cast of characters, and they've all got their own interesting little backstory, but they don't fit together at all. They're a random hodgepodge of cool, quirky guys and gals. Team Fortress 2, on the other hand, it felt like all these guys belonged together. They were a ragtag crew, and they were just fighting an endless war for no reason with this cool Cold War pseudo science fiction backdrop. It was cool. Now, you can still have fun in Overwatch without that unifying set of design principles, but it definitely lacks something that Team Fortress 2 had in spades. Now, I don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. Overwatch is some of the most fun I've had with an online multiplayer game on PC in years, but I don't know if I'll be playing it in 3 years. I just don't know if it has that staying power. Rhythm Heaven Megamix. The reason there's so many monkeys in Rhythm Heaven is that the game is here to remind us that we're all monkeys with monkey brains that like to be stimulated with simple, satisfying, tactile rhythm. Now, Rhythm Heaven's always been my favorite series of rhythm game. I like how simple it is. I like how it's not forcing you to react to a bunch of complicated inputs on the screen, but rather makes you anticipate the groove and respond to it with very precise inputs. The original soundtrack is great, and some of the songs are downright fantastic. Couple that with the quirky, inventive design of the team that brought you WarioWare, and you have a winning formula for a series. And Megamix is the best of greatest hits of that series. Great game. Loved it. And it has original songs, all of which are great. So play it. You gotta buy it if you like rhythm games and have a Nintendo 3DS. And I guess the audience is narrowing here. But if you fall into this small demographic of people who absolutely adore demanding, tight, but straightforward rhythm games with simple, poppy beats, you will love Rhythm Heaven Megamix. Dark Souls 3, a near-perfect conclusion to a series that desperately needed to end! Well, maybe not desperately, but Dark Souls 2 proved that you can't just take this series and squeeze it till it's dry. Making a Dark Souls game work requires deliberate care in designing its levels, its scenario, its characters, its world, and none of that is possible without creative passion. I don't think Miyazaki is the only person who could ever make a Souls game, but the reason he's the only one who's been able to do it right is because he has a vision and he cares about the series. But it's time for him to move on. He said as much. Bloodborne was his first massively successful, might I add, foray into other things, and please, just let him continue. Now whatever, the business of From and Namco or whoever is probably going to continue to milk the Dark Souls IP until its nipples are dry. But if the mainline From Software team and Miyazaki move on completely, they'll have left us with the best Dark Souls game on a technical level. It's not unambiguously better than Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 1 has to be credited for its beautifully interconnected world, its originality being the first entry into that world, but at the same time, Dark Souls 3 improves on it in almost every way. As a dyed-in-the-wool fan of the series, I am so happy with Dark Souls 3, and I'm looking forward to the second DLC to close this out on a high note. Furi. Think of your favorite action game, any action game, Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, Dark Souls, anything where you're a guy who fights stuff. And now what comes to mind when you think of that game? What moments cemented its place in your memory? Odds are you're thinking of at least one boss right now. Furi cuts away all the fat. You only fight bosses. There are no hordes of faceless enemies to knock down. Just clean, lean, fast, bullet hell, hack and slash, parry, dodge, variety of gameplay that you have to master to fight your way through a chain of bosses. And it's fun, it's so fun. It really can't be understated how important it is for a game to just be fun to play moment to moment. Dodging should be fun, blocking should be fun, learning an enemy's moveset and exploiting it should be fun. The whole process needs to have incentives, visual and audio feedback aligned in such a way that it's satisfying just to do stuff. Furi adheres to that esoteric design principle almost perfectly. The raw kinetics of these boss fights are reinforced by a thumping techno soundtrack, beautiful visuals made by the Afro Samurai dude, and surprisingly, a pretty well-written story, which does exactly what the story in a game like this needs to do. It needs to give the action enough context so that you care to continue fighting. It's not Shakespeare, it's not trying to be Shakespeare though. It's a story told in broad strokes that succeeds. The game's harder difficulty mode, Furier, is one of the best implementations of a difficulty setting I've seen. Because the phrase artificial difficulty is thrown around so often and so wrongly, people have started to think it's just a joke and doesn't exist. But Furi's Furier mode is the shining counterexample that calls to light the problem of difficulty scaling in other games. When you turn the difficulty up, the bosses don't gain a million health, you don't do pea-shooter damage, and you don't die in one hit. Instead, the boss's movesets change to become more difficult to avoid and to react to. It's like your opponents, the bosses, have gotten more skilled. It's fucking awesome. The Furier mode doesn't feel like a totally new experience, but it does feel like new substantial content, not just dials being fiddled with to make you die faster. The only bad thing I can say is that the walking sections are terrible. They have no place in the game. I know what they're meant to do. They're meant to give you some breathing time between boss fights, I get it, but this sucks. They should not have done this. They should have done anything but this. So yeah, overall, Furi blew me away. It's a great game. They're asking for $20. It's well worth that price. Dishonored 2. Dishonored 2 is relentlessly impressive. Many games claim that you can play them any way you want. The world reacts to your choices. Your decisions matter. Shape the outcome to your liking. But mostly these promises amount to some multiple choice cutscenes, or if you're lucky, some wiggle room in how you can approach an objective. Dishonored 2 is the rare game that lives up to the promise of player choice through its gameplay. All of the game's huge, dense, vertical levels offer multiple points of entry. Lethal and non-lethal play are equally valid, unlike the first game where non-lethal options were scarce. Your powers can interact with each other and your environment and with the enemy AI systems in seemingly countless permutations.
It's too late for that, Rapallo. Guess what happens next? No!
Dishonored 2 is a stealth sandbox game, not an open-world stealth sandbox like Metal Gear Solid 5 was. Every level in Dishonored 2 is completely unique, designed to offer a great number of truly distinct options for play. And none of this would be possible if not for the clearly tremendous effort put into designing the levels of this game. The level design steals the show here. While every area is fleshed out, there are some obvious standouts. The Clockwork Mansion is nerve-wracking and brilliant to move through. As you master the way it turns and transforms, then you can start to exploit it against your enemies. You can slip into the underbelly of the house as it starts to change, seeing its inner workings, almost like the ending of Portal 1 where you get to see what's really making Aperture move. Pit the human enemies and the Clockwork Soldiers against each other. Woo! Options! And then there's Mission 7, A Crack in the Slab. This is just one of the best levels I've ever played. It's the obvious highlight of the game, or at least was for me. Break a glass bottle in the past to distract some guards, flip forward into the present, walk to the other side of them, flip back to the past to steal your loot, then make your escape. It's one level totally dedicated to fleshing out this single time travel mechanic, and it's fucking brilliant. And all that great level design and the unique fun powers that you can use to explore those levels are underpinned by gorgeous visuals, an atmospheric soundtrack, and a fun, goofy revenge story to keep things moving. Dishonored 2 is my favorite game of the year. Give it a try. And if I haven't persuaded you, look up a video called 80 Ways to Kill Jin Dash. That footage says more about this game than I ever could. Alright, that's it. Fuck off. Next video comes out 2018.